Good evening, good morning, where you're watching us from. I am Dalal, an incoming Kellogg student candidate, and today we have a highly requested consultant, Jessica Shklar, and I'm so excited to be here with her and introduce her to the GMAT Club community and everyone who's watching us today. We're going to go over Stanford's application today, and you can, of course, feel free to ask questions that we're going to try to incorporate in the walkthrough session, and if we don't have time, we're going to answer the questions at the end. Jessica today is here with us, and I'm so excited, and the session today is going to be fantastic. So Jessica, I'll give you the mic to introduce yourself, please.
Sure, great. Thank you. Hi, Dalal. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening in. I'm really excited about this discussion today because I think that often people leave the application to the last minute and they often overlook it or even forget that it exists. And so the fact that we're having this call is really a great message from GMAT Club, that all of you are listening, a great message from you to recognize that all facets of the application are important. We spend so much time on the GMAT and so much time on the essays and sometimes forget that actually there are more parts to it. So I'm really excited to walk this through. Just real quick background on me so that you feel like there's some credibility here. I am with mbaMission. I've been here, I think I was the 4th employee, and so I've been doing this full-time now for 13 years. I did go to Harvard for college, and then I worked in adult education and in admissions for a small university, and then I applied to 5 business schools. I applied to Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, Yale, and UCLA, and I got into all of them, which I do not tell you to boast. It's just because I feel like in my job, that's some credibility. I did end up going back to Harvard for business school, worked in the corporate world for a while at American Express and at JP Morgan Chase, and then found my way back here to admissions 13 years ago. And it was the best decision I've ever made because I get to talk to people like you and people like Dalal and help people tell their stories. So I do just want to point out that in the chat, I believe is a pinned link to a free download to our Stanford Insider's Guide. If you have not yet looked at it, I really encourage you to link it and download it. We write them every year. We refresh them every year. It's a 150-page book on everything you could want to know about Stanford. There's also in the chat a link to our essay analysis for Stanford. I hope you're not just starting your essays now, but if you are, there's some advice for you in there. So I think now we're just going to open up Dalal's screen and start talking through the application itself.
Yes, we will. Just really quickly before we get started, we've already done the HBS session with Maria. We've done the Wharton session with Scott from Personal MBA Coach. Today we have Jessica for Stanford and tomorrow for Kellogg. And tomorrow is going to be a very special session because Kellogg has always been my dream school and Jessica was my consultant. So, so I'm very happy to have you here today, Jessica. Thank you so much. Okay. So let's get started here. All right. So we have the application. Maybe Jessica, you can tell us a little bit about just really the deadlines and maybe just briefly the difference between the MBA and the MSX program.
Yeah, I will. And that's a great question. And even before I do that, I want to give you kind of my one biggest macro piece of advice. Well, I guess I have 2 about filling out the application. One, it's tempting to just fill it out online. And I really urge you not to do that, whether it's Google Docs or Word or whatever. Fill it out, rewrite the questions if you have to, and then just fill it out on a separate document. And the reason for this, there are a couple. One, I just think it's much easier to see it as a whole when you do it that way rather than when you scroll through. Secondly, you're going to want to leverage what you wrote for Stanford for other schools. And once you hit submit, you don't want to go back to that application. Then it's a PDF. You want to copy and paste. Just have it in a document, and then you can revise it for different schools. And it's just safer in general, I think, to have that as a document. So I really urge you, do not just fill it out for the first time online. So Dalal asked about MBA versus MSX. MBA is the 2-year full-time business MBA for applicants who are roughly 4 to 7 years out of school. Obviously, there's a range. But when you think about Stanford MBA, that's the program. MSX is a much smaller program, and it is 1 year. It is not an MBA. It is in the business school, but you don't get an MBA, you get an MSX, which is a Master's of Science in Business. And it is designed for people with a minimum of 8 years of experience. So if you have 8 years or more, you might be on the fence about whether the 2-year program or the 1-year program is right for you. If you're concerned about age, applying to the MSX takes away that concern. If you want a summer internship, the MBA is probably a better fit. Take a look at the deadlines. I don't know, Dalal, if you can highlight, but this upcoming deadline next week, September 13th, that is for the MBA application only. Then if you jump down to the first deadline for MSX, that is for the October deadline is for MSX only. So you cannot apply for the MBA for the October 13th deadline. But take a look at the round 2 deadline, January 5th. That's the same for the MBA or the MSX. Right, sorry, the September 13th is also for both. What that means is if you are not sure which one is best for you, or you are willing to see what Stanford thinks, you can apply for them simultaneously in one application. So you cannot do that in October, for example. But for September or for January, you submit one application, and there's a checkbox where you can say, I'd like to be considered for both the MBA and the MSX. Right. One short 1,200 character essay pops up that says, why are you thinking about the MSX? And then the career essay is slightly different, but fundamentally it's the same application. And then Stanford will make the decision as to which, if either, is the right fit for you. Okay.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great. I have actually, when you mentioned something about like filling out the application on a Word document, I have a quick confession. I don't think I ever said that to you when we were working together, but I was like, why is Jessica asking me to do that? It doesn't make sense, right? So I did the application. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it my way. I'm going to fill it. And then I remember I wrote a lot and then I didn't save and all of that just disappeared.
Now you know why Jessica said that.
I'm not going to do it again. So listen to Jessica. That's a lesson. Okay. All right. So in the welcome page over here, of course, general information, it does tell you in here, I think, to save your work often. That's what we were just talking about. So let's click on continue. The deadlines are down there, of course. Jessica, for the deadlines, would you say like what time usually that is for the deadline? The time, oh, it does say it. Okay, 4 p.m. Pacific. Okay.
Make sure you highlight that. And again, my advice, don't wait for the last minute if you can avoid it. They might give you some technical leeway, but if the servers are overloaded because everyone is submitting and you don't get yours in until 5 p.m., there's a chance they're going to accept it. I've seen them do that, but why give yourself that kind of anxiety? Right? You might as well just aim for a couple of hours the night before, especially 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 o'clock in the East Coast. You're just getting home from work. If there's traffic, if your dinner gets burned, like you suddenly are scrambling at the last minute. So I just always suggest a day before, a few hours before, something to give yourself that buffer.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so for the first name and the last name, I would suggest adding your first name and last name that's on the passport. I remember I didn't do that, and that was a little bit messy for Kellogg when I got accepted because, you know, my first name is Dalal, but then like on the passport, it's AASM continuously. So it's important to add your name that's on the passport, you know, just the name on the passport. Because of course-
When I went and got a COVID test, I was traveling abroad to see my family, and I put a name on my COVID test that wasn't the name as my passport. On my passport, I used 2 middle names, and the COVID test form, I only used 1, and I couldn't travel at the last minute. I travel. So
yes. Oh yes, that happens. Absolutely. Okay, so the addresses, of course, this is just very general information. I think you can kind of do that on your own. It's very self-explanatory, your birth location, all of that, right? And then we have, of course, race, ethnicity over here, the gender identity and sexuality. There's also here online privacy policy if you want to read that, of course. This is all self-explanatory over here. And then we have this section.
I'll scroll back up for a minute. You see, right up, keep going. Yes. Keep going. One more section. Okay. You may decline to answer by checking decline to state. You are absolutely allowed to decline to state. Yes. And if you have a good reason to decline, then certainly go ahead and do so. They will not penalize you for it. But
Right.
if you don't have a good reason, I would suggest not. I feel like it just, even though they cannot penalize you for it, it just makes things look less open. And Stanford care, all the business schools, they care about you being authentic, about you being open, about really sharing who you are. So unless there's some really legitimate reason, I would go ahead. I would definitely err on the side of giving them the information, not avoiding it.
Right, right. I remember in my case, I was like, wait, there's no Middle Eastern here, there's no Arab. So I chose the closest, which is the continent that I live in, which is Asia. I did Asian, and then I don't think they had that before. So I had to like write in the optional essay, like a little kind of like a sentence mentioning.
Middle East is, I think most Middle East consider themselves white, but I'm not.
Really? I I don't.
I know a lot of
Oh,
Iranians.
oh, wow. That's like,
Yeah.
you didn't have that before. I think I just checked Asian and then I was like, okay, but thanks for telling me. That's like new information. Okay, wow. I learn something new every day with you, Jessica. Okay, so the gender identity, and it's funny because white, like we're not okay, anyways, I'm not
No,
going to get into it. Humanities. Okay. All right. So over here, of course, you are free, of course, to say prefer not to say, if you don't want to. And here is really an important box here. And I think there's an emphasis on optional over here. And maybe Jessica want to say a thing or two about this section.
So Stanford has four, I consider it four 1,200 character optional essays. Three of them are at the very end, and they're really positioned as one essay with three examples. So sometimes people get confused by my terminology. I consider this a fourth one. When I'm brainstorming with my clients, I brainstorm this essay along with those three, along with the what matters most to and why, along with the why Stanford. So I actually consider Stanford to have 6 essays. So I do think that my biggest piece of advice is don't just jot down the first thing that comes to mind. If you've already written your other essays, step back. Say, what do they not know about me and that I want them to know? And then look for a story or an experience or something that you can tell them. The specific phrasing of this question is a little bit better than it has been in the past. There's kind of a funky wording in the past, but elaborate on how your background or life experiences have helped shape your recent actions or choices. So notice that there are 2 time periods in this essay. They want to know recent actions or choices, but how you did those based on something from your past. For example, making up a story. Let's say that you moved every 2 years, your parents were in the military or IBM where they moved, I've been moved, they move all the time, and you moved constantly, and therefore you chose to go to get a job in the same place that you went to college and had stayed in one company because you consciously chose that you wanted to build community and have stability because of that experience in your background. Or you loved that moving all the time and therefore you joined a rotation program where you're constantly moving every 6 months because you love that adventure of meeting new people. So that's just a random example off the top of my head of how those experiences. Maybe you grew up in a family where you're first generation college, but your parents really supported education and really gave you every opportunity. And now you've made a choice to give back through mentoring, or you've made a choice to support your parents. I had a client recently who supported her mother returning to law school in her 50s because she had been so supported by her own experience. So just here is plan it in advance and then remember that it's 2 time periods, recent actions or decisions based on some life experience. I just want to put a quick mention that if this is very last minute for you and you're nervous about it, you can always sign up for a free consultation with me or one of my colleagues and talk about that. You can use the consultation to say, this is what I've written about in all my other essays, but I suddenly realized this family one, and here are my options. What do you think? We can't read essays in advance, but we can use that time to help you kind of do a mini brainstorm if you need to, just recognizing that in half an hour, we're not going to know everything about you, but that you can suggest some topics to us. So, you can bounce those ideas off us too.
Oh, yes. Perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. Yeah, I highly recommend working with a consultant. Of course, I will always say Jessica because I work with you. but yes, we're the GMAT Club here. We love all consultants. Okay, great. So family information over here. So what is Stanford wanting to know from this piece of information? Why do they care, Jessica?
That's a great question. They're really just trying to get to know who you are. There's no value judgment on this. And I know some people feel really nervous that because it asks, do you have any relatives who went to Stanford? And you say no. And you're like, oh, I'm never going to get in. They're not looking at it for that reason. They're just literally trying to understand more about who you are and what opportunities you've had.
And maybe also, kind of really making sense of your story. Really, maybe if you have a parent who's worked in a specific field and they influence your decisions, and just kind of really understanding all of that, right? Like you were just saying, if you're the first person who is getting a college degree, right, and they see that your parents have never gone to school, that would actually mean something in your overall profile and your application.
But yes, absolutely. But if you come from a family like I do, where everyone in my family has undergraduate and graduate degrees, don't be worried. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a chance of getting in. Like, people can approach it both ways. They can say, oh, everyone else has relatives who went to Stanford, I'm never going to get in. Or they can say, Stanford really only wants first generation. No, Stanford, as all business schools, are trying to build a diverse class. They want all kinds of people in their class. And so what they're trying to do is just understand you. They're not weighing value judgments around your answers here.
Yes, that's a good point. Okay, great. So miscellaneous considerations over here. I think this is where we talked about where we have to check a box or something.
Yeah, well, this is previously applied to Stanford. So I want to just make a mention of reapplicant. Some schools will make you write a reapplicant essay, usually about 250 words, on what has changed since your last application. Stanford does not do that. And by the way, check every school. Harvard considers anytime you've ever applied in the past at all to be a reapplicant. So I have clients now who applied 5 years ago for 2+2, who are now having to write that, even though obviously they're completely different 5 years later. But Stanford does not want an additional essay. So your GMAT score still rolls over. You don't need to take it again if it's still valid. And they do want you to update your letter. It can be the same recommender or a different recommender, but they do want the recommendation to be current. They don't just want the old one. If you applied in the past, you still have to write the entirely new application again. I'll wait and see if there are questions down the road, because it can be a long discussion about how do you update what matters most to me or why Stanford. But recognize that they have the option of pulling your old application and looking at it again, but that you do not need to do an extra reapplicant essay. One last thing on reapplicants. I often get people saying, am I damaged goods? I was a reapplicant once. And I just want to do this really logically. Let's say Stanford's reading your application and they're like, wow, this person's got great grades and great scores, and these essays are amazing, and they understand why they want to, how Stanford will help them and what they want to get out of it. And this person is just such a superstar. Oh, wait, they were interested in us last year too? Yeah, we don't want them now. I mean, just logically, does it make any sense that that a school would be negative towards someone who's shown continued interest? It makes no sense at all. So please don't worry. If you're a reapplicant, acceptance rates across all schools, we actually did a study on this, roughly the same percentage, and in some cases a little higher for reapplicants than for first-time applicants. So please don't let that worry you at all, and just know that at least you don't have to write an extra essay for Stanford.
Would you say that maybe one of the reasons could be for you to get rejected would be that maybe someone else who has the same profile, or maybe they filled that seat before you, or?
No, I won't say that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's inside the inner workings of the school. We've heard the director of admissions at HBS in the past say, if both founders of Facebook applied, I would take them both. And actually, I had 2 colleagues at one point at mbaMission who had applied and both gone to Harvard, who were put in the same section, and they both came from the same desk at Goldman, both women. So it's easy to compare yourself to the people that you know around you. You just can't do it. Right. I mean, I look sometimes at what I've done now in 13 years, looking at all the applications I've worked on. And I realized that if you take all the applications I've worked on over 13 years across all schools and add them up, it's a fraction, like 1% of what Harvard might see in 1 year for its application. So you just, anecdote is not data.
Okay. All right. Okay, and of course you cannot reach out to the schools and ask. Sometimes most of schools won't really give you reasons, right? Because that's just a lot of work for them and they don't really reveal
They
that.
don't usually have a reason. I mean, sometimes it's an obvious reason, but the schools, I mean, Harvard has said they could fill their class 3 times over with the next 900 and the next 900, and there would be virtually no difference in the makeup of the class. So
Right.
there isn't a reason sometimes. It just comes down to luck at some level once it's down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, so okay. Fellowship opportunities over here, of course, if you've never heard of any of these, Google them, look them up. They have incredible, like they help you in a lot of ways for scholarships. And so the Knight Hennessy Scholars application, that is something very exclusive to Stanford, correct?
Yes, and it's extremely long. I think it's 2,000 word essays right now.
Okay.
And yeah, we're not even going to get into that.
Right, and it's applicable only to U.S. residents, right? U.S. citizens.
U.S. Stanford, but not Stanford Business School. It could be anywhere in Stanford, and it's extremely. I think it's something like a 1% acceptance. I mean, it's like a.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, great. So your current location, of course, if you're a full-time graduating after. So, what's this question right here, Jessica? Were you a full-time student graduating after September? Right.
This is looking to see if you're eligible for their Deferred Admit program, which is, if you know that Harvard's 2+2 is the most common one. This basically means that you can apply, but they will ask you to work for a couple of years first. It's a deferred program. This is a program. This is to apply as a college senior or graduate school.
Okay. Okay. If you choose yes, of course, there's more questions over here. All right. So moving on to the next one over here, your education. So, Jessica, first question, because I know a lot of students struggle with this because, GPAs in schools are different all over the world. Do I convert my GPA to the US 4.0 GPA?
If the school tells you to, yes. If they don't tell you to, no. And I don't know specifically what Stanford does. Typically, if they tell you that they want you to convert it, they'll give you a couple of sites that you can convert it from.
Right. I know that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, I know that Wharton says don't convert. Like we did a session yesterday, says don't convert. Like it was very clear.
Right. And here, if you also see that you are welcome but not required to submit transcripts for study abroad programs that were less than a year. Some schools want you to submit a separate transcript for study abroad. Some schools say if the study abroad course is on your main college transcript, you don't have to. So it's just every school has different instructions, which I wish they would be standard, but sorry, they're just not. So just make sure you read them through. This is another really good argument for reading this through in advance.
Okay. Well, I think this is an important section over here. If you've ever been suspended, just all of that. See, they're even asking you, that's another extra essay or an answer if you have been suspended.
And I want to really point out this. I had this funny conversation with someone years ago. He hired me to work with him on exclusively on his optional essay. And he said, I had a honor code violation, or some issue at school, and so I need to work on the explanation for it, but I don't even know why I'm doing this because I'm obviously not going to get it. I said, well, let's talk about it. And we talked about it, and I said, you know what, go on to the application with me, go online. And I said, read me this. And it wasn't for Stanford, but it was similar. Have you ever been suspended? I said, check off yes. What does it say afterwards? He said, it says offer an explanation. I said, right. It doesn't say, please stop the application here. Right. If they were not going to consider you, it would say, please suspend your application here. Do not continue. But the fact is, they asked for an explanation. That means they're willing to hear it. I'm not encouraging people to have DUIs or arrest records or honor code violations, but if you've had one, it does not ruin your chances. I have had people get in with all of those, with DUIs, with honor code violations, a whole range of things. I had a client who got in who had to restart his college after 3 years because he had some fight with a professor who blacklisted him or whatever. I don't remember now the details, but he had to restart his in a new school and do an entire second bachelor's after years. And he got into business. So as long as there's an explanation that takes responsibility, doesn't just make excuses, but you say, this is what I learned. This is what happened. I regret it for this reason, and this is what I learned. Then,
Yeah.
it's another opportunity to show growth.
I was going to ask you actually, and I know this is going into details, and of course you can always book a free consultation with Jessica to ask specific questions about your case, but the way that you would approach an answer like this, it would be not really just explaining what happened, but also what did you learn from that, right?
Yes, exactly. So the outline I use for optional essays generally consists of 3 words: acknowledge, explain, pivot. So in the case of a poor grade, for example, I'd like to address my GPA from my first year of school. That's just the acknowledgement. Explain. Frankly, I was probably too immature to start college right away, and I devoted much too much time to partying, and I regret the impact on my GPA. It's ownership. Pivot. I asked that the committee look at my improved GPA over the last 3 years and at my GMAT of 750, blah, 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 as evidence that I can do the work. So you're redirecting the admissions committee. It's that same construct if you have an issue here, right? I'd like to acknowledge that my junior year of school, I made a mistake by sharing test results. Immediately after I did it, I knew it was wrong, and I went and acknowledged it, but I had recognized that I had to pay the consequence, and I did. Subsequently, I joined the Honor Code Commission, and I joined a field where integrity is incredibly paramount. And I have given talks to students on the importance of integrity, and I've learned from it. Right. So you try to redirect to show why it's not an issue.
That's a brilliant way to approach it. Actually, it makes it so much simpler. It just makes it so much simpler, right? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Let's talk about undergraduate funding sources. Of course, this is where you talk about how you funded your undergraduate education and percentages over here. And you have a button to check here or a box to check if it was tuition free. Your additional coursework. Okay. Oh my God, this question always comes. What do I add in here?
Before that, let me just say on the tuition, and just as really this is a macro statement for all of the application, please be honest. If you get accepted, they have a background check company that will do extensive background checks, and Dalal knows how extensive those can be. And they're not looking for, like I said, I worked 4 hours, I volunteered 4 hours a week, but it was really 3.5. But they are looking for numbers, right? Yes. Dates, numbers, discrepancies there. They'll give you a chance to explain. It's not going to be a blacklist, but you just don't want to have to explain. So if you'd rather not have anything to. So don't feel like this information is going to sway them one way or the other. It's just, again, context for them. So be honest here. You have to be.
And before we move to the additional, I think you were referring to when they did the background check, because I had a startup, and oh my God, like in different country, and I had to bring the code and all of that and just the banking information, and sometimes that takes a while. So exactly, be honest, right? You don't want to be in a position where they find out something and then the school contacts you and all of that. Okay, great. The additional coursework.
It's, only fill this out if you have something to say. Yes. But don't forget that you might have something to say. If your company had you do a training course, if you did a one-day online thing, all of that counts. Anything professional, and I would say anything that is, even if it's professional but in a different field, I might put that in. A professional executive coaching license, or etiquette coach, or grammar, or bartending, maybe. I mean, they're not going to reject you because you put something like that in here. So if you have anything where you did something, you put time into it, I would put that here.
Okay, great. Yeah. So add language, of course, languages that you speak other than English. Okay, if you speak any languages other than English, so if English is the only language that you speak, you don't put anything in here, right? Don't add English again. Okay, so let's continue. We're getting to the fun parts right now. So the test scores over here, of course, I think this is self-explanatory, Jessica, right?
Yeah.
I think so too.
Don't hesitate if you feel like you've taken the GMAT a number of times and you're nervous about that, please don't be. Schools would rather see you take it multiple times to try to get the score up to where you think it can be. They don't penalize you for taking it multiple times.
Right. Okay, the activities and interests. That was one of my least favorite parts because it's a lot of writing in here.
When you You have 320 characters for that description. So you list the activity. That can be organizational or hobby, right? So an activity would be, I'm on a basketball team through my company, and an interest might be, I do fantasy football on my own. I paint, right? What role did you play? It could simply be participant. It could be coordinator. The dates, average time, they know that it's really impossible. There might be some times when you do it 10 hours a week, you might go a month without doing it at all. Do your best with them to annualize it. Number of members could be 1 if it's just your hobby. If you're taking a course, it could be 10, 15. If it's part of a national organization, you might want to just do sort of your chapter. But again, they'll understand that if it's a national organization and you put down 15 people, they're probably going to figure out that you're just talking about your chapter. And then the description, again, remember that, look at, I gave a presentation this morning and I made this comment. So make a point, was just like you do with an essay, underline all the different components of the essay. So make sure you're answering the question fully. Here you have that in this mini question. Description, your role, the impact, or the contribution. So there are 3 sections, right? The description, your role, and the impact/contribution. Make sure you cover all of those. So the description, very brief, fantasy football league organized with my friends. Your role, commissioner. And your contribution, I found the team, helped lay down the ground rules, and have coordinated the draft, and have managed unruly members when they are disappointed in their team's results. Okay, 320 characters, spaces are included.
Okay, right. So spaces are included. So we're maybe remove that.
Yeah, so no hard returns.
Okay, great. No, I just wanted, this is for the purpose of the presentation, just to make it simpler for you to know what are the aspects that you should cover in there. And then of course, over here it says that if you're still kind of active with this activity, just leave 2 blank over here. Okay, great. And then of course,
you do not need to do what Dalal did here and outline it with description colon, because that's going to use up space. Just make sure that in your answer, you address all those 3 components.
Absolutely.
Harvard does not limit you, I believe, into how many activities. I believe Harvard does 3 in college and 3 post-college. I don't believe Stanford limits you. I've generally seen no more than 7. Up until college, these are during and since college that are significant and meaningful. So that really doesn't mean that once for 2 hours you went to an afternoon volleyball game, right? Like, it's significant and meaningful. They'll know if it's fluff. So think about 3 to 5, maybe to 7. And it says there, a sustained depth of commitment in a few activities may demonstrate your passion more than minimal participation in many. Okay? Right. So you don't feel bad if you have 3, but you've been really involved with them, that's fine. If 5 and you've been really involved, that's fine. If you start to scrape the barrel for that 2-hour afternoon lecture, you probably don't need to put that in.
Okay. And then of course, over here, they also say in this section here, they give you more answers to probably questions, right? So meaningful postgraduate part-time work should go in the professional experience section, which we're going to cover in a minute. All right. So the internships and all of that, paid or unpaid.
If an internship or part-time job was meaningful to you, you can cover it here, but you don't have to.
Okay. All right. Good point. Let's talk about this section, which I'm pretty sure a lot of students have questions about. And we do have a few questions, but I'll give you the mic to kind of just introduce this section.
Job gaps, we'll start with the job gaps on employment. They consider a gap to be anything more than 4 months. So if you graduated in May and started your job in August, that's not a job gap. If you started in May and graduated in May and started in January, that's a gap. The key here is, again, look at the, have you had any gap? What did you do during that time? It's not necessarily a negative to have that. Just talk about what you did. If all you did was sit there staring at TV and catch up on your Netflix list, I probably wouldn't say that. But think about what you did. Caught up with family, visited my home country, took the time to take a course before starting in the field. I accepted a job offer at my company, but the start date wasn't until January, so I used that time too. Generally, the rule of thumb, I think we have a blog post called something like it was when it was during a lot of period of layoffs, we wrote it. So it has to do with layoffs, but it basically says, lay off your worries if you use your time well. And it's the same thing. Don't worry about having a job gap if you use the time well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good point. And we have a question here. Someone asked if there is a minimum work experience threshold for Stanford GSB full-time program.
Because they have the deferred admit, that minimum has to be something more than 0, because if you're at 0 and you're in a full-time program, you would be applying. We generally see 3 to 5 years as the sweet spot, but I've certainly seen 10 years and I've certainly seen 2 years. So generally, unless you've had phenomenal experience with 1 year, like it was really a family business and you've been working there since you were 10, we don't see less than 2 years. But that's not a rule. It's just Stanford wants to know that your contributions will make a valuable addition to the class in a discussion. Right. Without having work experience, they won't necessarily see that. So it's more about quality than quantity, but generally you need at least 2 to 3 years to have that quality.
Okay, great. Jessica, maybe we should talk a little bit about this section right here, right?
So this is kind of like the honor code violation. You want to check off honestly that something happened, but so when you check that off, is there an explanation?
It just says you have to add it in the additional information section.
Oh yeah, so you have to explain it. And remember, again, in a background check, they will call the company and they may ask, was the person terminated or did they leave voluntarily? So if you did not come forward with it and they find out through someone other than you, that's a huge red flag. So I would say that's a bigger red flag than checking yes if it happened. And again, I have seen people who were fired who get into business school. I had actually 2 clients in recent years fired by one of the top consulting firms who both got into top 3 schools. So it's not necessarily a strike against you. You just need to manage it.
Right, right. Okay. And it's really all about telling your story. How do you say it? And what are the reasons behind that, right? Like, what did you do and all of that? So, okay, great. So accomplishments, if you're applying for next fall, right? If you're applying for a deferred enrollment, there's a lot of really here just tips, right? Just very specific tips, probably they gather from all the questions.
Well, let's not talk about deferred enrollment, but go back up a little bit.
Yes.
So include postgraduate full-time work experience. One entry per position, even if you had multiple positions with the same employer. So if you were promoted, you still only put that entry in once. So you might want to think about using that small to the 320 character description that we'll see in a minute to talk about your flow of work there. You started in this position and then got promoted. Although remember, this complements your resume. And
I think this is the 300 one you were talking about.
All the way down, your job responsibilities, reason for leaving. You can put in reason for leaving, left first role at company because I got promoted, and then left second role because I got promoted did a lateral move to a different division. Reason for leaving is one of the biggest pieces of confusion people have, though. I want you to rephrase this question in your head. It's not reason for leaving, it's reason for having left. The only time you need to fill this out is for old jobs. You have not left your current company. So you don't need to write, I would leave for an MBA in order to learn, blah, 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 blah. Just write NA if it's your current job.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay. Yeah, I think in my on my application, I think it was something like I wanted to focus on my entrepreneurial, my company. And that's why I left, right? So if you come from a non-traditional background, like sometimes what do you say, right? Because non-traditional backgrounds also, they have, I would say like it's a little bit more complicated to write this section for non-traditional backgrounds, especially if you run your own business.
Right. When it comes to the rest of this, their primary job responsibilities, a lot of times I now get asked, well, isn't that all on my resume? Well, this is a whole other topic, but your resume should not be responsibilities. It should be accomplishments and impact, whereas this is responsibility. So there is a difference. Does that mean you cannot put impact in here? Actually, Dalal or Abhijit, if someone can pull up our blog post called Accomplishments Not Responsibilities and post that in the chat. That is a really nice description of what a resume bullet point should look like, since I know that's off topic for here. But for this one, for responsibilities, you really want to give them an overview of your position. If you have budget line responsibility, if you have management responsibility, you might want to talk here about who you interact with, the levels of people. If you have room after that, sure, you can put it in accomplishment. But this should be more of a context about your job than the resume with bullet points of accomplishments.
Okay. Abhijit just like posted it. Accomplishments. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. For the upload your resume, we're going to try to go through this a little bit quicker because I know the essays are going to take a little bit of time. But you and I are having so much fun, like we always do. So yes, Abhijit, that's the correct one.
That's the correct one.
Okay. All right. So for the resume, 1 page, right?
1 page per decade of experience. If you're applying to MSX, it's okay to have 2 pages. If you're applying to undergrad, the 2-year program, you really should try to keep it to 1 page.
So for the post GSB aspirations, Jessica, do I have to know exactly what I want to do? What if I change my mind? What if I'm unsure? What do I add in here?
Well, that's a great question. So this kind of relates to the essay too, so we can kill 2 birds. I want to give you a scenario. Let's say you're graduating from Stanford and you're walking across the stage and your hand is out there for the diploma and the dean is about to hand it to you. And he says, wait, Dalal, what job are you going to next week? And you tell him, and he says, but that's not, you wrote in your application essay. That's not going to happen. He's not going to say, no, you can't have that.
Give me back the diploma. Give me back the diploma.
They don't have it. They're not asking because they're going to lock you in. They're asking for some other reasons. First, business school recruiting starts really early. About 6 weeks after you get to campus is when recruiting for summer internships starts. You don't have time. You're moving to a new city, possibly a new country, setting up your apartment, finding your study group, figuring out where the gym is, setting up your figure out the grocery stores. You're not also going to do all the soul searching on your life that you haven't done. So by asking you now, they're forcing you to think about it earlier. That also means you get to look at whether the school has the resources for you. If you're going into consulting or finance, yeah, all schools will have that. But if you're going into a really niche field, I had a client who was going into mining. Well, not all schools are going to have options in mining for him. So you want to make sure that in advance that the school has resources. They also want to know what you want to do so that they know that recruiters who are interested in you will find students there, right? If you if you want to go into real estate and that school just doesn't happen to have a lot of real estate recruiters, well, you're going to be an unhappy graduate and they don't want that. So there's a lot of education that goes into this. We'll get to this more with the essay, but this will probably be something that you repeat from your Why Stanford essay. But this is primarily a short-term goal answer. You can briefly, in 255 characters, address long-term goals too, if it comes up.
Okay, great. That's great. All right. Well, I wish they had the essay section after, but let's talk about the awards and honors really quickly, and then we can jump into the essays.
And just make sure you see what they're asking. In the basis of selection field, X that out for a second.
Oh.
All right. Explain the award criteria, how often it's given, who selected the recipients, the number accepted, applied, and selected if it's available. They're just trying to get a sense of, is this a little rinky-dinky award or is this a really big deal? So just make sure you answer what's being asked. That's all.
Right. Okay. All right. Perfect.
Employment awards, a lot of people don't have this. Don't feel bad. I would say of everything in the application, this is the one that's blank more often than anything else. So if you are blank, don't worry about it. But if you got a particularly high rating at work, that's an honor. If you got an internal applause award, that's an honor. So,
okay. Yeah, I was just thinking, what if your mom gave you an award? What if this? It probably doesn't apply in there. It's more like,
I remember when I was
in college.
When I was applying to college, I had received an award from a religious school I went to that they translated into the award for Jessica Michelson for blessed acts of loving kindness. And I was like, yeah, Mom, I'm not putting that on my college application. I wrote it as service award. I'm like, yeah, no name, service award.
That looks fancier. Yeah, service award, right? Okay,
I hope that you are not only thinking about these essays now. So I'm going to make an assumption that 1 week before the deadline, you've thought about these. So my comments are high level, but Abhijit, can you just pop up again so it's current, the link to our essay analysis, which is in there. You had that at the beginning as well. Yes, right there. We also have a book you can purchase. It's the only thing on our site, at our only publication that's not free, on sample Harvard and Stanford essays that are annotated to talk about why they're good. Please don't just assume that because that's good, it's going to get you in, right? They're just suggestions of some things that worked. But the essay analysis, that's it. But go back to that page. So there are 2 essays. What Stanford really likes, what I really like about Stanford is that they let you figure out how many words you need to tell your story. So they say 1,050 overall, but you can divide them between the 2 essays as you see fit. So what matters most to you and why, which they recommend 650, but I have seen 500, right? And why Stanford? What matters most to you and why? Stanford describes this essay as bleeding on paper. They really say that this should be extremely personal. This is what makes you get up in the morning. This is not a career essay. This is not a why Stanford essay. This is what matters most to you and why. Don't forget the why. A lot of people forget the why. And what they do is they string together a bunch of anecdotes and then say, oh, and all this matters to me because I do all this mentoring because I didn't have good mentoring growing up. That's not deep enough. This is really an essay where you think deeply. I've had people write about religion, about suicide, about death, about illness, about losing sight of what's important in their life. I've had people write about abandonment, about being molested. I mean, this is deeply personal. And if you have not had a crisis or a tragedy in your life, that's fine. It's still personal. There's something that makes you get up in the morning. There's something that shapes the way you live your life. What is that?
Right.
Okay? Don't forget the and why, right? What matters most and why, right? Why Stanford? Why Stanford is a career essay. And I'm sorry, I would keep asking you to do this. Go to our website, please. And under the, it's a free personal statement guide. And I don't remember what it's under.
It's this one right here. We were just talking about it right here.
No, it's just called the free
free personal statement.
Statement guide. Look under guides, look under, you know what, go down to not insiders guides, go down to admissions guides. Yes, I think it's there.
Okay.
And that's the complete one, but then there's the, keep going. Personal statement guide right there. That is a long essay on how to write the career essay. Why am I saying that why Stanford is a career essay? Because when you talk about why you want to go to Stanford, you're talking about what you want to get out of Stanford. But what you want to get out of Stanford is determined by 2 factors. 1, where you're coming from, and 2, where you're going, right? So if you can't articulate what that gap is between where you're coming from and where you're going, you can't articulate what you need to get from Stanford. So this is a traditional career essay. What are the mistakes I see people make with this? One is not giving any context for why Stanford. Another big mistake I see a lot is people telling Stanford what they already know. So I want to go to Stanford because it's located in Silicon Valley. That is telling them what they already know. They go to work there every day. But given my entrepreneurial ambitions, I'm very excited that Stanford's location in the heart of Silicon Valley will give me access through XYZ program to internships and experiential events like ABC, which so-and-so student told me was what helped her develop the business plan for her startup. Right. Here's a key sentence. Don't tell the school what they already know. Tell the school how those facts that they know are relevant to you.
Right. And I think for the why Stanford, you have to do a lot of research and attend the events and talk to students and reach out to the clubs and things that you really see yourself doing when you go to Stanford.
And that's why I had the GMAT Club pinned to the link of this chat, the Insider's Guide. If you have a week to go and you don't have time to visit and you can't talk to people, that we've done a lot of that research for you, so you can pull that up. I want to make one note that is very subtle on that why Stanford. Go back up. It doesn't say why Stanford GSB. Okay, it does say that in the description. Why describe your aspirations and how your GSB experience will help you realize them. Stanford has this belief that it is a unified campus. Unlike Harvard, which believes each school is very much independent, Stanford sees itself as connected. And so they really appreciate when you take advantage of the entire campus across the street. Okay?
So mentioning mentioning a school that you believe will, or a club at a different school or something like that. Okay.
Okay, a couple quick things. Length, try to stick to the length, but if you go over by a few words, no one's going to count them. I'm not comfortable with more than 5% over. Some consultants go up to 10%. Test it though. There was one year when Wharton would cut you off after about 497 words when it was a 500-word limit. And I was doing a lot of last-minute scrambling editing. So test it ahead of time, but typically they don't count words. Or you upload a PDF and they're not going to count. But try to keep, they have a very good sense after reading all these essays of how long they are.
Right.
Other thing is the formatting. Every school has different requirements for formatting, and some schools won't even give you them. So if you don't know, I mean, follow what they say. Stanford says double spaced, nothing smaller than 10 or bigger than 12-point font. Don't use a cursive font. Just be professional. Right. Short answers, what I was referring to earlier. These are, yeah, right there. Short answer questions. These are optional, but as I told my kids about homework when they were little, optional is not optional. You have 1,200 character examples. Look again, underline the key components of this application, of this question. What's the time that you created a positive impact? What was the impact and what made it significant to you or to others? 3 sections. What was the situation? What was the impact? Why was it significant? 1,200 characters, spaces including. You do not have to do one personal, one professional, and one community. You can do any 3, but it's nice to show different sides of who you are. I believe that Stanford has started asking this question as a way of forcing you to go deeper on what matters most. Rather than sticking in all these great anecdotes, I think they're extracting those from the what matters most essay by having you do these 3 essays. I'll also tell you that these are actually easy to write. 1,200 characters is roughly 200 words. It's not that difficult once you've thought through. The biggest part is the planning. And then once you've done it, it's not as hard to do. Okay.
Right. I like this question because it gives you the ability to think, from a professional standpoint at work, maybe you did something, maybe with your hobbies, maybe a certain club in the community or something like that. Religious, you said something about religious communities, maybe even in school or maybe just other settings like your personal life. So I'm pretty sure you can come up with like 3 ways that you've made a positive impact.
And what's also nice is when I started this job years ago, a lot of schools would ask for this deep dive essay on a time that you demonstrated leadership or a time that you added value. We'll talk tomorrow. Kellogg is the only real school that asks that now. So this is a nice opportunity. It's like that boasting essay. It's a nice chance to do that. And here you have 3 little chances. Additional information. Stanford's pretty clear. We're deliberate in what we ask. We think we've known you. You've gotten to know you. Only answer this if there are extenuating circumstances. So we talked about this earlier. This is the acknowledge, explain, pivot. If you think there's something that you need to explain to the admissions committee that is not explained elsewhere, a failing grade, not even a job gap, because that's addressed in the job gap question.
Low GPA, maybe?
Yeah, failing grade, a low GPA, DUIs and honor code, those are already explained. Maybe how you picked your recommenders. If you can't ask your current recommender, you could explain here. I've seen people use this if there's something quirky about how their bonus was calculated, just to explain that. So you should not have to use this. Don't feel that you have to, but it's a chance if you just have to explain something.
Okay. All right. Letters of recommendations. We have a question actually from Shklar, and he said, should it be from the manager at my present organization, or can we get it from a previous organization? Will that be okay?
So you have 2 recommendations, and the ideal is your current one, but you may not be able to ask that person. If telling them that you're thinking of leaving is going to jeopardize your career, or if you simply don't get along with them, then they're not a good person to ask. So if you can ask someone from your current organization and someone from a previous one, or if you've been at your current organization for a while, someone in your current boss and someone who worked with you in your first couple of years, that's ideal. But if you cannot, that's a great explanation in the optional essay, the additional information, just to say, asking my current recommender would jeopardize my professional career here. Therefore, I asked so-and-so and so-and-so who know me better. The most important thing with recommendations is not their level of seniority. They're not the ones applying. They need to be 1 level senior to you or more. They have to know you really well. They have to be willing to do a good job on the letter, and they have to think you're amazing. Having an MBA from that school, being really senior, none of that matters.
Okay. What about, Jessica, in the case of, and we have to wrap this up soon, but actually in 5 minutes, but what about in the case of like being a business owner, an entrepreneur?
So you could ask a partner that, even if the partner is a peer, that's a time when you could ask a peer. You could ask a customer, you could ask a supplier, you could ask someone on your board of directors, you could ask your lawyer, your accountant, someone who's seen you in a professional context. One last thing, they put this in red because you can't change it later. Waive your rights. Number 3 there, waive your rights. You are not waiving the ability to see the letter. This is not an agreement between you and the recommender. Waiving your rights between you and the school. It's just saying you can't sue the school to show you the letter. If your recommender wants to show you the letter, that's fine. You're just waiving your legal right. You're not waiving anything else.
Okay. And then if your boss is, it's like, maybe it's a family business. If your boss is your uncle or dad or mom, would that be okay? No.
No, generally not. Generally, you want to avoid family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
it's very objective about you.
Oh, well, my mom would write the best thing about me, of course. Like you would to your kids, right? Okay, great.
Handwriting. That would be my constructive feedback.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you have.
Here's the exact, you don't even need to write that essay. I'm not submitting a letter from my current supervisor because this is why.
Yes, exactly.
So they really should be very little reason for Stanford, at least, to write that additional essay.
Okay. And then, of course, the email address of the person who's writing it should be their work email address, correct?
They do not want Gmail addresses because it's hard to verify that that's the right person, or please, God forbid, AOL addresses. But if they've retired, if they've stopped working, if they're not comfortable using their Gmail address, generally what we suggest is that they use everybody now has a alumni address from the school that they went to for undergrad. Right. So you might have to, especially if they're a little older, walk them through how to get that, but that will be forwarded to their Gmail or their personal mail. But it means that for the school, there's some kind of validity that they are who they say they are.
Okay. All right. So I think at the end over here, we have just your signature, and then the application fee is non-refundable. So that's something to remember. And I think it's what, $275 or $250?
I haven't applied in a long time.
Something like that. Oh, yeah. Oh, see, $275. Fancy. Okay, yes. Great. $275. I think that's the highest really of the business schools. I believe.
Yeah.
Well, it's Stanford, so it's okay. Yeah, I think this is it. I'm gonna see if there's actually one last question over here. I think we took all the questions. Someone just asked, just really lastly, how Stanford evaluates applicants, international applicants specifically, who have significantly high work experience, like 10+ years. What would you say to that?
Look at you based on your contribution to your organization, your leadership, whether you're a fit with the class, whether your career goals make sense given your age and experience. If you have 10 years and you say that you want to go be a first-year investment banker at Goldman, they may not believe that you would be willing to do that. They may not believe you don't have the family obligations. So they're going to see, does it make sense? I would say they don't evaluate you fundamentally any differently from anyone else in terms of what they look for. It's just that the details for you are different. Just like with military, they're looking to see what's your leadership, what's your promotion level, what your ranking, your awards. They're looking at, for every applicant, across the same: your contribution, your commitment to the school, how well you've performed professionally, how well you've performed. Are you an active member of your community? Will you be an active member? Things like that. There's nothing specific different. It's just they're looking at your story. I do want to make another reminder that if I can help you, please fill out a request on the consultation form for a free consultation. If you all write to me and say you need it this week, I will have to give you to someone else as well. But I'm available. Put my name in there if you want. I believe, Abhijit, you put up a place where someone could put a testimonial or just an acknowledgement if I did this, if you found this was helpful. If you can just highlight that, I would really appreciate that evaluation feedback. And I will be back tomorrow for Kellogg.
Yes. Jessica, it was such a pleasure. I haven't seen you in a minute, and I'm just so happy for everyone to hear from you and see what kind of, consultant you are. You're just an incredible human overall. So
Well,
I
thank
just want
you.
to thank you. I want to thank you for being here. And of course, I want to remind you all, if you haven't watched the HBS walkthrough with Maria, please watch it. If you haven't watched the Wharton one with Scott, please watch it. Today, we walk through Stanford's application with Jessica. Tomorrow, we're going to have Jessica again. We want Jessica every day, so we're so lucky.
Anyway, I'm not to talk to you about love that. So see you all tomorrow for Kellogg. And
Yes, thank
Dalal,
you, Jessica.
as always, it's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's watching us. I will see you tomorrow, same time. Bye. Bye, Jessica.
How was that? Did that go well?
We're still live, I think.